I thank you all for being here, and I thank Mr. Sahu for inviting me to do this talk. My field is not competition. I'm an enthusiast on competition, but not an expert. So, with the warning that this is a non-specialist speaking, I have some ideas on the economics of competition and how we should think about competition. The first is a very general principle in the field of public economics. When do you use the coercive power of the state? It's a very basic question. We have come from a background of Indian socialism. In a socialist country, the government has godlike power and meddles in your life all the time. The government feels free to walk into your life as and when they like. That is not the way a civilized country works. That is not the way a market economy works. In a market economy, the coercive power of the state is to be employed for exactly three reasons. There are three kinds of market failures where the pure free market on its own would generate an inefficient allocation of resources. They are externalities, they are market power, and they are asymmetric information. So there are exactly three headings where the pure free market goes wrong, where the allocative efficiency is not obtained through the use of the free market. There and only there you have a justification for bringing a government to interfere in the life of a private citizen or a private person. Other than that, we should deregulate everything. 90% of what Government of India does should not be done. 90% of the time and effort that Government of India expends on interfering in the economy should not be there. Okay, so we have vast mistakes in the structure of government. The reason I'm saying this is because this immediately gives you a flavor of the enormous importance of competition policy. If we had to construct a new theory of government, if we have to think what is a government in a market economy, it is only three things. It is asymmetric information, it is externalities, it is market power. So market power is one of the three main headings of what a government is all about. Okay, so that gives you a sense of the scale of the importance of competition. It is no small matter. It is not a minor matter. It is one of the three reasons why you would ever have a justification for the interference of a government in our life. Okay, so from this point of view, we should take it very seriously. It's an important issue. It's a main issue. It's not a sideshow. The second point I would like to make is to reiterate what was just said, that if there is one magic, if there is one secret sauce which produces a healthy, dynamic, vibrant economy, it is competition. So if there is one big idea that makes a country work properly, it is competition. This goes way back. In the 1930s, the economist Joseph Schumpeter coined a beautiful phrase. The phrase he coined was creative destruction. Okay, so creative destruction is the idea that in a well-functioning market economy, you've got to have a birth and death process. There should be new firms being born all the time. There should be old firms who are dying all the time. A country where firms are not dying is a country that is in deep, deep trouble, because there are always inefficient firms. There are always uncompetitive firms. Those firms should die. They should exit the landscape. Then they will free up the labor and the capital that will be used by the more dynamic, more efficient firms. So creative destruction is the lifeblood of capitalism. In the priceless words of Professor Jayant Verma, our good friend from IIM Ahmedabad, he says, capitalism without failure is socialism for the rich. Okay, so it's that bad. So you should not conceive of capitalism without failure. It is as bad as socialism. It's just that it's narrowly devoted to taking care of the interests of rich people. So it captures the same deadness of socialism, but it applies that amongst the rich, which is something we should never do. So the heart and soul of a vibrant market economy is creative destruction. You've got to have a country where new firms are being born all the time. You've got to have a country where inefficient firms are dying all the time. There's something wrong with a country where firms are not dying. The death of firms is good. We should never feel unhappy when a firm dies. This is not the way we are brought up in Indian socialism. In Indian socialism, when a firm gets into trouble, it runs to the government for help. Okay? We should instead be saying to ourselves that we treasure the birth and death process of firms. Death is good. Okay? So if you are a practicing Hindu, you will appreciate the metaphors of creation, preservation, and destruction. Okay, you need the destruction also. If you don't have the destruction, the balance of the world is messed up. So you have to have all three. You should have creation and preservation and destruction. Whereas under Indian socialism, we only put all our effort on preservation. We would always try to protect, we would always try to preserve. You would have heard horrible phrases like asset reconstruction, where we somehow think that a company that is in trouble will be recovered or rescued, or somehow as Montag says, when you use the word sick for a company, then the metaphor is hospital. Okay, what do you do when you're sick? You go to the hospital, you become healthy. Okay, no, that's not what we should do with firms. When you're sick, you should die. Death is good. Okay, so it's very important to have death, and without death, there is no well-functioning capitalism. So here's a test that I like to employ. I like to look at who are the top 50 firms in India today, and I like to look at who are the top 50 firms in India 10 years ago. Okay, and if you see too many names popping up, we have a problem. And I think we have a problem. I think we have a serious problem. I think we have a serious problem that there are 500 rich families in India who dominate entrepreneurship and firms of India, and that is a serious problem. So we are simply not doing enough to create an open and competitive environment. Look at the United States. You have completely unknown people rocketing to the top. You have completely unknown people with no business family background who found companies, who become multi-billion-dollar companies, who come into the top 50 ranking of firms. Okay, that process is not happening here. It happened briefly with Infosys and a couple of firms where unknown people came in and created new companies. For the rest, we're not doing that in India. And I think that's a big mistake in our landscape. Okay, so from that background, let us look at what has been done as Competition Commission of India. It is an extremely important and interesting initiative. Parliament applied its mind to the problem and chose, and in my opinion, wisely chose, a non-sectoral approach. Okay, so the idea was that competition is not a problem of banking. Competition is not a problem of telecom. Competition is not a problem of electricity. Competition is a cross-cutting, non-sectoral theme. Okay? And I think that makes a lot of sense. Now, this has generated a lot of friction in the country. There are many sectoral regulators who are unhappy about this formulation. There are many sectoral regulators who would like to say that I am RBI, I am the regulator of banking, so I do everything about banking. I will make sure that building safety codes are obeyed by banks. I will make sure that competition policy is done by banks, and so on. So you just tell me whatever is required, I will implement everything. That's a feudal mindset where I will look after everything. That is not rule of law. That is not how we construct modern government structures. All firms work with many laws. You work with the Income Tax Act, you work with the Indian Penal Code. They have different enforcement arms. There is no reason for all the work to be bundled into one. That bundling into one is an urge for comprehensive feudal power, and we should not respect that. We should look for efficient ways of thinking and efficient ways of working. And I think it makes a lot of sense to have a cross-cutting competition thinker who does not owe allegiance to any one sector. And that's very important. So let me give you an example from finance. In finance, there is a direct tension between competition policy and microprudential regulation. Okay, what is microprudential regulation? Microprudential regulation is the business where a government regulator writes requirements that will reduce the probability of the failure of a financial firm. Okay? Now, what is the temptation for the regulator? The temptation for the regulator is to come up with crazy requirements to shut off entry, to shut off all competition, because after that firms will not fail. Okay? So if you have a fat, uncompetitive, inefficient industry, firms will not fail. Microprudential regulator will look great because he will be able to say, look, I'm doing such a great job of making sure that the firms are safe, that you're not getting any firm failure. But that runs directly in hostility against the principle of competition. So there is a direct tension between microprudential regulation and competition policy. Okay, so as all of you know, in the last 20 years, we've probably had 5 new banks being licensed by RBI. And I think that's a clear evidence of this tension. Why have only 5 new banks? Because it's convenient for RBI. Because RBI doesn't care about the larger interests of society of having high levels of competition. We should have had 500 new banks. But that's more work for RBI. So we need independent bodies who will pursue divergent and conflicting goals. That is the way we will produce better governance in the country. If you create a single feudal master for one sector, then the feudal master will become lazy, and that is not good for the country. So it's good to have that tension. It is good to have a distinct body that will advocate competition, that will pursue competition, that will speak up for the issue of competition. Otherwise, those issues will get lost. I want to tell you an example of a phenomenal success story from the UK, which had a big impact on our thinking when we were working on the Financial Sector Legislative Reforms Commission, which, as you know, has drafted the Indian Financial Code. In the UK, when the global crisis took place, the government nationalized Royal Bank of Scotland. Okay, they nationalized a couple of banks, but one of them was Royal Bank of Scotland. Put yourself in the shoes of late 2008, early 2009. The world was coming to an end. It was a very dangerous time for the future of Western civilization, and the UK Treasury and the financial regulators claimed that we have to nationalize Royal Bank of Scotland. And you can imagine at that time, everybody was in a hurry, we want this done tomorrow, oh, don't bug me about minor little problems. The Office for Fair Trading, which is the competition authority in the UK, sat up and said, no, this is not acceptable to me. Why? Because when you have public sector ownership of a bank, that creates a non-level playing field. Households will always move money in favor of a public sector bank, and this is not fair to private sector banks. The nationalization, the temporary nationalization of Royal Bank of Scotland would damage competitive conditions in the UK. So the Office for Fair Trading sat up and said, I will not allow this nationalization to go through. You may say it's a crisis, you may say whatever. My dharma is competition. I will block what you are doing. So the bargain that was worked out was that alongside the nationalization, the Royal Bank of Scotland was forced to sell some 500 branches so as to reduce its presence in the market, and it was forced to accept a rule that under no circumstances would its share of deposits go up beyond 10%. Now, is that brilliant or is that brilliant? Okay, can you imagine the power of applying that kind of thinking into India? We do the exact opposite. We prevent foreign banks from opening branches in India. We have public sector banks with 80% market share. Okay? We have absolutely no loyalty to the principle of competition. We do things in public policy that are absolutely inconsistent with the challenge of competition. So this is the value of having a non-sectoral competition regulator. He will think in ways that will challenge the blinkers of other parts of the public policy establishment, and that is a good thing. Okay, now that I have sung the praises of the Competition Commission of India, and I have high hopes that the Competition Commission of India will become as powerful and as effective of the Office of Fair Trading, that the Competition Commission of India will ensure that the market share of all public sector banks put together drops below 10%. I wish to say that there are 5 more dimensions of the policy agenda on competition. Okay, so while the CCI is very important, I would like to say that there are 5 more aspects of the competition agenda, and all of us need to keep it on our mind, and we need to pursue these aspects too. The first is rule of law. Okay, so what? Rule of law. Why am I saying rule of law? The rule of law is central to competition, and here's the logic of why. Some firms will cheat. Some firms will violate laws. If that gives them a competitive advantage, you have destroyed the possibility of fair competition. Okay? What is the most unfair competition of all? Cheating on taxes. Okay, so imagine I'm a firm that pays taxes. Somebody else is a firm that doesn't pay taxes. How is this a fair competition? Okay? Taxes are bigger than the profit after tax margin. So if you cheat on your excise, if you cheat on your mining royalties, if you cheat on your income tax, yeah, that's enough. You've completely changed the competitive landscape. What is our dream? Our dream is creative destruction, where efficient firms drive inefficient firms to death. But if inefficient firms will cheat on taxes, the whole story stops. If the inefficient firms will cheat on regulations, the whole story is over. We have seen a long procession of crooks in India who have cheated on various rules, who have cheated on various laws, who have got into markets by unlawful means. That's a travesty of competition. Okay, so the first thing we should be pushing as the competition agenda in India is rule of law. Okay, so let me give you an example. Some friends of mine are in a private equity fund that purchased a company that makes sand. Okay, so you quarry for stones and you make sand. And there is a law which says you have to pay 5% of your revenue as royalty to the government. Okay, so one fine day they showed up in the capital of the state with a check for that 5%. And the people in the government department laughed at them because apparently never in India's history has anybody showed up in that department to pay a royalty. So there is a law which says 5%. Not one firm in that state has ever paid that royalty. And now think of the competitive dynamics, that you've got one firm which is a formal sector firm which has the best technology, but 5% is the profit after tax margin. You have destroyed the ability of that firm to grow and to compete and to drive the other firms into death because you don't have rule of law. Okay? So there is a very important link between rule of law and competition policy. When some firms don't pay taxes, you have shattered the competition. You have destroyed the ability of the efficient firms to kill off the weak firms. Okay? Because if inefficient firms, if weak firms just cheat on taxes, you've lost the whole story right there. The second big theme in the field of competition that we need to do much more in terms of the pursuit of is globalization. Okay? A great source of competition is the great wide world. If you have foreign goods competing with Indian goods, that's competition. Okay? In fact, in the argument of an economist, if you can drive down the costs of transportation sufficiently, which is true of some goods but not all goods, if you can drive down the costs of transportation sufficiently, then the Indian authorities can basically forget all about competition policy, because the world market supplies that competitive pressure. There will be no monopoly pricing in India because there will be perfect competition. There will be so much of pressure from foreign sources that it will drive down prices, it will eliminate any excess profits, and it will generate price equal to marginal cost. So in a world with zero cost transportation, in a world with zero interference by the government in free trade, we're done. For a large class of goods, we're done. What is the meaning of this in terms of a public policy agenda? The public policy agenda is we should be removing all barriers to international trade on goods and services, and we should be improving the infrastructure of transportation so that the cost of transportation comes down. Okay? So consider a class of goods where it is easy to transport them across countries. For them, we are completely done. In India, we have reasonable progress on barriers to international trade on goods. They're not quite done. We probably have a 10-20% wedge even now on account of costs of transportation plus tariffs plus non-tariff barriers plus anti-dumping. Put it all together, it's probably a wedge of 10-20%. But we are absolutely terrible on services. We are one of the world's worst countries in terms of the barriers to services trade. And more than half of GDP is services. So there's really a lot of an agenda to go in terms of improving competition in services. Achieving competition in agriculture is good, but you know the gains are small because agriculture is down to 15% of GDP, losing 1 percentage point of GDP every year. So yeah, you need to fix agriculture, but it's a minor part of the economy. Manufacturing, we've made reasonable progress on globalization, but manufacturing is only 25% of GDP. The bulk of GDP is in services, and in services, India is extremely closed, and that is a mistake that we should be solving. I want to give you an example of an enforcement action that was taken by the Competition Commission. This was about the pricing by NSE on currency futures trading. And in my opinion, the Competition Commission of India missed the plot because actually the main market was outside India. You're competing with the world market. More than half of rupee trading happens outside India. The Indian firms are competing with that world market. And I think Competition Commission of India saw this in a very narrow-minded way, that they took a tiny part of the market where there were two exchanges, which is probably adding up to 8% of the overall market, and arrived at a conclusion that the pricing was not okay. And I think that was a mistake in understanding the scope of competition of that market. The third big issue that I would like to push on competition policy is the phrase external financing. Okay? Let me explain in a moment. All of us in India think that a firm grows through retained earnings. So you're a company, you make some profit out of the depreciation and out of the money that you have as profit after tax but is not paid out as dividend. You've got spare cash inside the company and you put that spare cash into projects. Okay? All that is fine and well, but it works only for established incumbent players. But the most important players in any industry are the disruptive new firms. Okay? So there are people who have ideas but not capital. They can only grow out of external capital. So if you get new equity capital or new debt capital into the challengers, then they will be able to grow and they will be able to challenge the incumbents. This requires a capable financial system. At present in India, we do not possess a capable financial system. When we do financial sector reforms, we will get a capable financial system. That will increase access to external financing and thus improve competition. So that's an important part of the competition agenda. The fourth element of the competition agenda is something I already touched upon, which is privatization. We need to get the government out of business. The job of the government is to do public goods and to do governance, not to be in business. The government should not own Air India. The government should not own State Bank of India. The government should not be in business. We should just get a level playing field with competition by putting out all PSUs into a privatization process. A small and related theme, but important, is that we need to use OECD standards on procurement. When the government of India buys pencils, the procurement procedure should be such that we guarantee a level playing field between foreign suppliers of pencils and Indian suppliers of pencils. At present, we have a non-level playing field where we require the bidder to be an Indian firm. That is a mistake. The people of India are better off when the government buys the cheapest possible pencils. And that will drive up competition in India when Indian producers of pencils are subject to competition from foreign producers of pencils. And my fifth and last big idea on how to pursue the competition agenda in India is what is being loosely called the costs of doing business. And my proposition to you is like this. Look around you, look into your friends and family. I'm sure you have a cousin or a cousin's cousin who might like to start a restaurant. Okay? And think of the pain and the misery that you go through to start a small business in India. How many people like us are actually willing to take the plunge and start a business? It's just horrible. The amount of pain that the government of India imposes on you in terms of tax collection, in terms of compliance with shop and establishments rules, in terms of getting permissions, in terms of not protecting you from gundas on the street, okay, in terms of the goons in Bombay asking you to put up a sign in Marathi, and so on. The amount of irritation that is presented is such that a lot of people like us just say, hey, this is too much trouble, I'm not going to start a business. That is bad for India. It is very important that more people start businesses because that is what generates competitive pressure. All the frictions that are irritating people like us when we think of starting a company are a source of lack of competition. So I'm done with my thoughts, and I'm happy to take some questions and comments. I just want to say two last things. As you can imagine, this is a field which is very intricately interconnected with the economics. So I gave you an example of the Competition Commission of India's order on NSE. I think it was just grounded in a lack of understanding of financial economics. We need to bring a lot more economics and a lot more research into this field so that all of us can think sensibly about it. This is subtle, it is complex. The thought process in this field has enormous consequences. So we really need to ramp up our research and our understanding of this field. And my last comment is that if this sort of stuff interests you, you might like to read my blog. Please Google for Ajay Shah's blog. I tend to write about a lot of related things. Thank you.